Hello again, Adrian here. This is now part two of what I was giving as testimonies of how God has provided in my life at various different times and the circumstances of how that happened. And so what I was saying is that fairly typically you get a sort of situation which looks like there's no way out of. You try and figure it out, try and work it out, trying to think, okay, I prayed about this and nothing's happening, but maybe God will do this, or maybe God will do that. And then he does something which is totally unexpected, never could have figured it out. And that just shows that, to God be the glory, because he did it in a way that we could never have figured out, never have sort of controlled people and manipulated them to do something in a certain way that we wanted, but it just turned out the way God wanted to do it, so that we were all surprised and amazed and just gave glory to God. So I was talking about the time we moved to Bible college, or we were wanting to move to Bible college. This was in 1989, and I'd given up my job in the chemistry department in June. Bible college started in September. So I didn't have, a wage between those two times. We had a buyer for the house, but it was a slow market. Nobody was moving. The people that wanted to buy our house were in a chain. They couldn't sell their house, and so this was the way it happened. In the end, they just said, they were going to step away from the deal, not interested. So we got to end of August, beginning of September, still nothing happening. It's funny, we were living next to the pastor at the time, and they went away for 2 weeks on holiday, and they said, "Oh, you probably have moved by the time we get back." I said, "Oh, yeah, we will." And I said we were house group leaders at that time, so we had a house group on the Thursday, and I should have started Bible college on the following Monday. That's when we had to be there for, and when we had to start. So what happened was we had a place to rent in Retford, which is not far from Battersea, but we'd sort of phoned up and said, we probably won't be able to be moving anyway. Sorry, if you want to rent it to someone else, we won't be able to come. So couldn't sell our house, didn't have any money, given up the house that we were going to rent, and we were just having the house group. So, well, there we were in the house group, and the phone rang, and it was some friends of ours who had some friends who said that they would rent our house, and they wanted to move in pretty well immediately. So, they're quite happy to rent it for that 3 years that we were not going to be there. Then, so put the phone down thinking, okay, that's a possibility. They can, pay us rent so we could pay the mortgage, and, fine, that would be okay. Phone rang again. It was the father of one of my wife's co-workers in the hostel that she worked in, who said that they'd pay for my first term's tuition fees, which was about £600. So God sorted it out, basically. 2 different directions, completely independent of each other at the last minute. And so we packed up the house and moved in 4 days, and I started Bible college. And by the time the pastor got back from holiday, we'd moved. So there's somebody else living in the house. Quite amazing, really. So then after Bible college, 3 years, while I was at Bible college, some pretty tragic things happened, actually. This is when God didn't sort things out. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes things go wrong. My wife was killed in a car accident. I still had the last year to do. I managed to finish. And then, although I'd been planning to move to Hungary then, I thought, couldn't cope with it. I was advised to move back to Wales and see what would happen. So in 1992, I moved back to Wales. And not a particularly easy area to find a job, North Wales. Never has been, but if there's a bit of a recession on, then it's difficult. But what I did was, I just again, another thing that I see the way God does things. I've had times in my life when I've just prayed for something and just waited and waited, but not done anything, and sort of came to understand that God also wants us to take steps as well. So the thing is, I prayed about, God would provide a job for me, and then I wrote to every possible, firm and employment that I could possibly imagine. I mean, I applied for Anglesey Aluminium, I applied for the power station, anywhere where they might need scientists. I also applied for other things like, involved with tourism or translation work or whatever that I could do. But I couldn't find a job. And then I went into Bangor one day, went for a coffee in a little cafe, met up with a guy I used to work with. We used to share the same office when we were working in the university. And he was now working in a research institute, which was in fact in university buildings. And he said, why not go in and see if they could give me a job? And he put in a word for me. So I went in and they took me on for a couple of weeks doing some basic experiments. And then they gave me a 1-year contract. And I think it was, or at least they took me on more permanently. And so God sorted it out, before the money ran out, so I had some money, which I was paying the rent and living, and before it ran out, then God got me a job. But God still kept talking to me about moving to Hungary. So, I was there in Wales for 3 years, but, the call to Hungary was still there. But by 1995, I got into debt again, because, again, more outgoings than income, and this time it was about £4,000, the overdraft. And I didn't want to move away with debts, so how was I going to pay the debt if I moved away? So I prayed again. In fact, it was on the Sunday night, I got prayer at church this time. Asked for prayer, so I got £4,000 in debt. I just asked God to sort it out. The next day, Monday, the boss of the research institute, not my immediate boss, the boss of the research institute came into the office. He said, my immediate boss of the project that I was involved with, which is to do with fungus actually, which is not my expertise, but I got involved with that, had just resigned, and he'd like to offer me his job, to head the project, and that would involve £4,000 a year wage rise. So it's one of those times when your jaws just drop, But yeah, so I took it on, and so I worked on the project for another, I don't know, can't remember, another year or so, and finished the project, and then left and moved to Hungary with the debts cleared. So that was great. Of course, when I moved to Hungary, again, it was a situation that, I had no idea. I believe God wanted me to move to Hungary, but I thought it was something to do with Bible teaching. But I just came, on a tourist visa. It was still communist at the time, 1995. No, sorry, it wasn't communist, but it wasn't European Union yet. Sorry, the political changes had happened, but it was still difficult to get residence because it wasn't European Union. So, no idea how to. They said, give me 3 months. That was it. Couldn't get a job because I needed a work permit. Couldn't get a work permit. Then I met up with a girl who I'd known years before, who was part of a prayer group, a charismatic Catholic prayer group that I'd been involved with years before. I just met her in the town and started chatting, and she was an accountant, and she suggested I should found a 2-man company, and therefore if I did that, I would be able to work and I'd be able to get a residence permit and everything. My first thought was, sounds complicated, but I looked into it and I just took it step by step, and eventually, it took a while, it took about 9 months I think, but eventually I managed to get the company, and I managed to get a residence permit, and managed to get work, and basically that's what I've been doing ever since for around about almost 20 years. So I've been doing translation work and English teaching within my own company based on the fact that I just met this girl in the street, just happened to, come across her. So another miracle, I think, God's provision. In the 1990s sometime, I was living in Hungary this time, and I'd gone back to Wales for a visit. And at that time, there were no flights to Manchester from Budapest. Now there are, which is great. But at that time, I had to fly to London and then get the train. And so the plane went from Heathrow, and, I worked it out. So if I set off from Bangor on the first train, 6 o'clock in the morning or something, I could get to Heathrow with a couple of hours to spare, and I'd catch my flight. But the train from Bangor to the first change, which I think was in, I don't know, Crewe or somewhere, often change, was delayed. So we regret any inconvenience. And so I was late catching the connection, and I sort of figured out that I'd be arriving in Heathrow just as the plane was taking off. And so I was praying and saying, God, sort it out, please. I've got no insurance, nothing. So sort this one out. I was thinking the plane will be delayed. No, somehow I managed to get there on time. No, got to stop the plane. I was thinking, well, how's it going to work out? And I got down as far as, I think it was Watford. And I just happened to look out of the window, and it said buses to Heathrow. So 10 seconds to think, grabbed my case, jumped out the train, and managed to get a bus which got me to Heathrow well in time to catch the plane. Amazing. Another thing that happened a bit later on, I was working in Hungary at the time, and I had a car, but it was going wrong. All kinds of things were going wrong with it, and I needed to get a car, but I didn't really have enough income to get one. And so I sort of vaguely prayed, Lord, it'd be good to get another car. Not really seeking the Lord in great passion or anything, but just, it'd be good to get another car, Lord. And again, it was money from 2 different completely unrelated sources. I got a phone call from the guy who was a lecturer when I was at Bible college, but that was like 10 years before. And he was saying they were doing a project in Budapest, and they needed a translator, and would I be willing to do it? And it was for a week, and they'd pay me £100 a day. Well, I mean, that was a lot for Hungary at the time, 30,000 forints a day, when I think at that time probably the standard wage wasn't much more than that for a month, or maybe it was about 50. So I took that on, and someone else gave me a gift as well, and the two added together, I was able to buy myself quite a decent car, which lasted for a few years. Then in 2005, another real crisis happening here. Had very little work, had debts piling up. My accountant didn't want to do the work anymore, and so I had to find another one who wanted a lot more money. And I was thinking, wow, what's going to happen here? I'm going to have to move back to Britain. I always keep thinking about this. Money's going to run out. I'm going to have to move back. And at that point, God spoke to me, and he said, talk to the church about all the times that I've solved impossible situations in your life. I said, okay, right. So I did that. I mean, I was ministering in the church at the time. And so I think it was at a house group or something. And I said, okay, I believe God wants me to do this, to talk about all the times that he solved impossible situations. And so I went through this list like I'm doing now. And I finished up by saying, well, I'm in another one of those situations at the moment, really, but this is what's happened in the past. And a few days later, I got a phone call from, again, a Christian contact, but not from the same church, someone I didn't know very well, who suggested that I try a language school in Székesfehérvár because they were looking for teachers. This was before the crisis. And maybe they could take me on. So I phoned, and they did take me on. So I did some teaching for them for a while. But I still, to this day, and it's nearly 10 years later, I'm still doing translation work for them fairly regularly. So again, at the last minute, God provided in a way that I couldn't have figured out, and it's all great. There's been lots of other things since then. I think I'll leave it there because, again, it's 15 minutes. But things have happened to the present day, and God keeps on doing miraculous things in my life. See you again.